Okay. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for making it out today. This is the web hosting workshop. Our presenter today will be Alexander. He'll be walking you guys through this, and I'll pass it off to him now to get started.
Hello, everyone, and I would like to welcome you to this workshop. One second, I'm having an audio issue. I do apologize. Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Hello, and welcome to the web hosting workshop. Today, I will be talking a little bit about how to get from an app that you've already developed and putting it out on the internet. So we'll talk a little bit about the internet and its structure, and then discuss things like registering a domain, actually taking out an instance in the cloud, and so on and so forth. So my name is Alexander Pirvu. I am a student of ICT and infrastructure here in the Netherlands, Eindhoven to be specific. And yeah, I often work with Linux servers. So today we will be using Ubuntu server later on. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So here's a little overview of what to expect in this workshop. We will talk a little bit about the internet, how it works, and look at a couple of diagrams and kind of get like a basic understanding of, well, what does it take whenever I, open up the web browser and I go to google.com or whatever website it is, and, kind of get an understanding of, what process does your computer take to load a web app. Then we'll talk a little bit about the different types of hosting and, of course, the big debate, self-hosted versus the cloud. And then we'll talk about domains, choosing and registering a domain, and also DNS records. Then we will deploy our server using DigitalOcean, but of course, you're always able to use any other provider. Just for today, we will be using DigitalOcean because it's really easy to see and, kind of get an idea of what cloud products are like. We will create an instance which on DigitalOcean is called a Droplet. And so we will explore a little bit of the cloud. And then we're going to get into details on how to install, everything we need to create a web server. So namely, we will be using CyberPanel and Open Lightspeed, which is a management GUI, and also the web server instance and reverse proxy. We'll get into what that means shortly. And then we are ready to deploy our own website. So we will look a little bit at PHP options, how to set up SSL, and we will show how to create a WordPress website, because oftentimes those can be the basis for a quick and simple website that you want to set up. Okay, so let's look a little bit about a little bit at the internet. So we will look at IP version 4 and IP version 6, the domain name service, proxies, and a couple of common ports that are used on the internet. So the basic structure of the internet is, it's a network of networks. So you have your home network, you have your local ISPs network, internet service providers network, tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1 internet service providers. Tier 1 being basically the ones that, worry about the global infrastructure. So like the ocean cables, the satellites, whatever it might be. So let's have a look at how all of that works. You have routers that forward data packets, and they, route where the data should go and come from. You have switches which connect several devices. I also didn't mention in this diagram, because this is the more about the internet, but if we look at your home network, you'll also have an access point. As a matter of fact, you have routers, switches, and access points put together into one device, and that is the one that you get from your internet service provider. In the big internet, you actually have separate devices for that. Then we also have proxies, which are gateways, and content delivery networks, which, yeah, they're located all over the globe, and they basically relay content so that it's delivered much faster to you, the end user. And of course, servers, which are also computers that are just connected on the internet, and they serve our content. Right, so let's have a look at what route it takes when it goes, when you go and connect to Netflix.com or Google.com. So you'll start at your home network, and then all the traffic will go through your local ISP, followed by a tier 3 ISP, tier 2, tier 1, all the way across the globe, back down to tier 2, and then all the way to your server. So this is, in essence, how it will work with DigitalOcean. I believe DigitalOcean has just a tier 2 connection, so they don't even have a local ISP. Don't worry about what exactly that means. It just means that they have, a much faster access to the internet and also more bandwidth, more than you would find probably in most places. So let's have a quick look at what DNS is. And DNS is the domain name service. So when you type in google.com, your computer has to figure out, well, where is Google? And in order for it to do that, it uses the domain name service, which is basically like a telephone book or a directory of every single website in the world, or every single domain and the IP addresses. So the way it works locally is that your computer will ask your router for DNS, and your router will say, oh, I've got 1.1.1, which is Cloudflare's open DNS, or 8.8.8, which is Google's DNS. Oftentimes, you will have a DNS that is just provided by your local internet service provider. I actually have it modified on my local network to be Cloudflare and Google's DNS. So then your computer will contact the DNS server and say, hey, where's google.com? And then the DNS will respond with the IP address. Oh, you can find it at 128.199.54.113. And this happens in a matter of milliseconds. And then your connection will become established because your computer will send out data to your router, which will then send it to the following router, and so on. Like we saw in the network of networks, it will keep going until the destination is reached. And what about proxies? Well, we have a couple of different types of proxies. We have reverse proxies, and we have forward proxies. So what exactly is a proxy? Well, it's a man in the middle. So it makes the requests that you send out from your computer. It takes them and it can modify them or just pass them on to the destination. So, for example, you can use a proxy to mask your IP address, make your connection more secure, whatever it might be. It stops a couple of different packets of data being sent to the destination. Oh, okay. So what about a reverse proxy then? Well, it's very similar. Think about it as a way to route things once the connection has reached the server. So in today's example, we will be using CyberPanel and Open Lightspeed. So the reverse proxy will be Open Lightspeed, which is also the web server. Now, what that means is that on one server, we can actually have multiple domains, and we'll see that in the different types of hosting as well. So Cloudflare, we will also be using Cloudflare today, which will give us SSL, it will give us content delivery, and it will act as the forward proxy that will also add some other security benefits like DDoS prevention and always online technology. We'll talk about what that means when we look a little bit closer at Cloudflare. So yeah, forward proxy, it connects outgoing traffic to the destination server, and reverse proxies connect incoming traffic to the relevant destination. What about some ports? Well, what exactly are ports? Ports are kind of like lanes of traffic on the internet. Certain services will operate on these certain ports, and on the right-hand side of the slide here, you see some common ports that are used. The most important ones that we will be covering today are port 80, which are just normal HTTP ports, and 443, which is the secure version of that. Then of course you have mail, you have database. You've probably seen this quite often. Oh, and we will also be using SSH because we will connect to our server once we create the instance on DigitalOcean. Yeah, and then you have TCP versus UDP. You don't really have to worry too much about the differences, but just know that some services require both TCP and UDP communication, others only one or the other. So depending on what you're deploying, this could differ. Now, what about the different types of hosting? Well, we have quite a few different types. And of course, the big question that you get when you are initially starting up a project is, should I host this myself? Should I use my home internet connection to do that, my own computer and so on? And we'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, the benefits of the cloud and what is the cloud, of course. So yeah, we have self-hosting, shared hosting, virtual private servers, dedicated servers, cloud hosting, and there's also co-location, which I'll talk about at the very end. Self-hosting, we'll start with that. Self-hosting is where your applications are on your own hardware. You really control every aspect of your own web experience. So you have your own hardware, you have your own data, you have a stable internet connection, reliable power supply, and in essence, you kind of build your own cloud. Of course, it's really great because you have access to every single aspect of it, but that can also be a downside because you have to have the technical expertise to make sure that, well, your internet connection is secure, that yeah, everything is up to date, there are no backdoors. There's a lot of issues involved with self-hosting. You really have to manage every single aspect of it. So what about shared hosting then? Well, this is actually the cheapest and the simplest way to deploy a website. And in essence, what it is that your application or website is on the same server as multiple other websites. So all the domains point to the server from the DNS records, which means that all of the resources on the server, the CPU, the RAM, the storage, are shared amongst different websites. So in this example, you can kind of see here, you have your website.com, your website2.org, website3.nl, website4.com, and of course, my personal website here, a little bit of a plug at the end. Well, yeah, so what the server has here is a reverse proxy. So when the connection is established, it'll be the data packet sent to it will be addressed. So, if I have data that is for your website.com, the server's reverse proxy will direct all the traffic there. Okay. And then the following option is virtual private servers. So this is a little bit between a shared host and a dedicated server, and we'll talk about a dedicated server in just a second. It is a physical server that is still shared with other users, but your resources are mostly dedicated. Sometimes when a certain client, has a spike in CPU usage, the server will automatically adjust, but that's a little complicated and beyond the scope of this workshop. But what it allows you to do is that it allows you to deploy your own specific software and package installs, so you can really manage everything from the operating system. Also, if you make an Angular app, you need to install specific things to run and compile it. Really depends on your application. If you wrote a web app in .NET or ASPX, you probably need to use Windows and IIS, for example. For our demonstration, we will be using a version of Apache, which is called Open Lightspeed. It's a separate project, but it is a little bit more optimized and it has similar functionality to also Nginx. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later. So yeah, this is what a server in a data center looks like. This is a weird example, but it works. So we have one client that uses 8 cores, 128 gigs of RAM, and is running a bunch of things. You have Windows Server, 5 different web applications, 8 databases, a phone exchange system for their internet telephones, and maybe even an email server. And then you can see that all the resources are split up by individual clients. So you really pay for only what you get. So you have limits. In this case, one client has 8 cores and 128 gigs of RAM, and you really don't go over those limits. So the final one is a dedicated server, which is really the king of all hosting options. However, it comes at a very, very significant cost because you own everything. You own, well, everything as in you manage everything. You don't actually necessarily own the server, but the entire server in a rack in a data center is yours to use. So you have full access to everything: security, maintenance, updates, operating system, and so on. So every part of, everything is under your control in essence. But yeah, it is the most expensive option, and you do have to have a good understanding of security and just everything to manage the entire server. Well, what about the cloud? Well, the cloud is currently the biggest buzzword out there. What it really means is that there are many servers in a data center that combine computing resources. So the best part about it is that you really don't need to worry about hardware. Everything is super scalable. So what what does that actually mean? You've probably heard it 1,000 times. Oh, super scalable applications, so on. The cloud is brilliant for that. And what that actually means is, like, let's take Facebook, for example. Facebook, the way that they write their programs, they split every single task that a user does into multiple little services, microservices. So if we have, let's say, 100 users in New York that at the same time they all want to log in, well, what does the cloud do? Well, it realizes that, okay, we have currently only 20 services dedicated to logging in. And when the requests come in, the cloud will automatically spin up 80 more instances to meet the demand. Why is this great? Well, this is great because of the cost feature. Whenever your services are not being used as much, the cloud can scale down. Whenever there's a higher demand, the cloud can also scale up to run more microservices and so on. We will not be demonstrating a scalable app today, but we will be using this hosting type later on. So yeah, I mean, you can see it here. Like, we have the cloud, which is basically just a data center where you have all the resources grouped. So CPU, RAM, storage, and then we have a bunch of different servers in the data center that you really don't manage at all. You just manage every aspect of your application. So a little summary: we have self-hosting, where you can host everything yourself. You have shared hosting. VPS hosting, dedicated servers, cloud hosting, and finally you have co-location, which we don't really cover in this workshop, but in essence, what you're doing is to add redundancy. And that can be useful, obviously, if let's say the data center, one of your data centers goes down that you're running your applications on, well, you have a second instance in a different location that is completely geographically different. That could also be a couple of, performance improvements as well related to that. Let's say you have a big company and you have offices in the US and you have offices in Europe. When you do co-location, the connections can go to the nearest data center where you have your applications. So that means decreased latency and better performance. And yeah, essentially redundancy is something that is very important because you don't want your services to ever go down. Right, and let's move on to domains. It's time to actually give your application a name and say hello to the internet. So we'll talk a little bit about registering a domain, configuring the DNS records, and using Cloudflare to sort of link it all together. Of course, there are many different top-level domains. And what is a top-level domain, you might ask? Well, it's .com, .org, .edu. There are a bunch of different types of extensions out there. Of course, that could also point to the purpose of your app or website. .com is the most popular one, but obviously if you're doing something with education, you might want to choose .edu. .gov is usually specifically reserved for governments, and of course, depending on what target audience you have, you might want to use a country or region-based top-level domain like .nl for the Netherlands, .ro for Romania, etc. There are a bunch of domain registrars out there. They're all basically the same, and it doesn't really matter which one you use, because at the end of the day, everything will be pointed to Cloudflare anyway. So you can actually use Cloudflare to register your domain, but of course, explore all the different domain registrars out there and try to find yourself the cheapest one and sort of stick to it. There isn't really an all-time cheapest one that for every domain it's the same, so a little exploration will do. I will show you really quick what domain registrar will look like. So I'm here on Hetzner, which is the company that I use for servers and domain registration. So you can use their lookup tool to sort of just see if your domain is available, because of course there are limitations on domains. You can only have one google.com. So if I just search for my hack PSU domain, let's see what different extensions are available. So you can see you can have .switzerland, .de, .eu, but of course, just about anything. You can have web.it as well, .computer, .dev, and you see the price per year listed here. So depending on which top level domain you go for, the prices can really, really differ. Right. Right. So let's talk a little bit about DNS record types. So we have A records, which are the IP version 4 address mappings. All it does is it points to an IP version 4 address. And we'll show how that links in a little bit later. An AAA record, or quadruple A record, is an IP version 6 address mapping. It's the same as an IP version 4, but it's just for IP version 6. And then you have a CNAME record, which is really just an alias record. So if I want www. Let's just say we have a design company, 252design.nl. If we want 252design.nl to go to the same place as www.252design.nl, we can create a CNAME record that points to the A record for 252design.nl. Again, you will see that a little bit later. And then you have the mail exchange records. You have which just route emails. You have name server records, which specifies where the DNS records are located, like the master ones. Then you have SRV, which is service location. It routes different services. A good example of this is if anyone's ever tried to make their own Minecraft server, an SRV record can point all traffic that is trying to connect to the server to the right port. For Minecraft, that's usually 25565. And then the text record is just machine readable data. And if you're using Let's Encrypt certificates, oftentimes when you do DNS validation, this is what record type it uses. All right, so using Cloudflare for DNS Zone, it offers better security, performance, and DNS resolution. The changes are almost instant. And most importantly, it acts as a proxy service. So traffic to and from your server is passed through their worldwide network. They have servers all over the globe. And what this does is whenever somebody in a different part of the world accesses your website or web app, some of the images and content will be cached in their network. So let's say you have your server in Germany and you have a client in Asia that is trying to connect. Well, the content will be passed through their edge network, they call it, which is their content delivery network. And instead of the client in Asia going all the way to your server in Germany, it will only go as far as the Cloudflare server that is in that region and retrieve the data from there. It is also good because it passes traffic and it encrypts it at the same time, and you can use this for your SSL certificates. And yeah, we talked about content distribution a little bit and caching through that example. In terms of security, it prevents DDoS attacks, and you've probably seen it. We'll do a quick demo of how that actually works in just a moment. So this is what the dashboard looks like. I will actually just go to the live one now. So here it is. You have your A record, which points to the IP version 4 address. Normally, you would configure your DNS records after you create your server instance or after you've set up your web server. But this is kind of what it looks like. So we have IP version 4 address, a IP version 6 address, and a CNAME or alias record for www so that it resolves at the same place. Right. So it is now time to actually deploy our server. I've just opened up DigitalOcean and I'm looking at the Droplets tab. So it is very, very easy to deploy a new instance with them. They call their instances droplets. So we're going to create a new droplet, which will be a second one that I have here. I'm just going to go for the sake of the demo with the cheapest one, but depending on your app, you might want to change this a little bit. So I'm just going to go with Ubuntu. That's perfectly fine for my case here. I will select Amsterdam since that is closest to my location currently. So Ubuntu is fine. You can also do a couple of different things where you can do different container distributions. The marketplace from DigitalOcean already has some pre-configured images. So if you want to deploy a FreeNAS or a VPN server or Plesk or whatever it is, it's all possible through their marketplace. All right. I'm also going to go ahead and enable IP version 6. That's fine for me. And I'm just going to use a password, which I will use a random generator in just a second. Wow, there it is. which has to fit their password requirements. And yeah, I just want one droplet. I'm going to say hack PSU test demo 2, because I already have another one set up, because the setup of the software actually takes a lot longer than the allowable time for this workshop. Right, so we are ready to create the droplet. Let's go ahead and just press create. Not going to worry about the password. And you can see here, it'll just take a moment to actually install Ubuntu. It takes maybe 10 seconds, honestly. It's very fast. While that is going on, I'm going to go ahead and just open up a command prompt on Windows. I'm actually going to go ahead and use the admin privileges just in case, but doesn't really matter. So what we're going to do now, you can use PuTTY, you can use command prompt, you can use PowerShell. It doesn't really matter. Any SSH client will work just fine. So I am just going to do SSH and then our root user at the IP address that we have for this one. So I'm just going to write this in 104.
Hey, Alexander, can you make that a little bit bigger? It is a little hard to see the command prompt.
Sure. Is this a little bit better?
Yeah, a little bit. Thank you.
I think I can just make it like that. There we are.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. So we're just going to put in the IP address here to connect to it. Yes, we want to connect to it. And then I'm just going to paste the password into here by right-clicking into it. Just type in whatever password you set up your droplet with here. And once I press enter, there we are. We are in Ubuntu in the cloud. Simple as that. With Ubuntu, it is recommended to do apt update to update all the repositories on first boot. And then if you have any packages that need to be updated, make sure that you run. Ooh, it's a little hard to see. One moment while I just fix this. There we are. So you can actually see the commands that I'm typing in. You can notice here that 131 packages can be upgraded. So let's go ahead and do that. Apt upgrade. I'm going to do -y, which will just say, yes, I want to upgrade everything right away. And we'll just let it do its thing. Meanwhile, if we were to just set this up real quick, let's just say we want to add a subdomain to the 252design.nl. Let's just say hack psu.252design.nl will point us to the instance we've just created. So I'm going to copy this IP address and put it into an A record. So you'll see hack psu.252design.nl now points us to this IP version 4 address, which is our server that we are just now setting up. Right, we'll save that. And you'll see that it is all set up. We will also add the IP version 6 address, which is just here. Copy that. And add a quadruple A record as well. And we'll just say the same thing, hack psu.252design.nl will point us there. And just save that real quick. Great. So this is still going to take a while, unfortunately. Are there any questions so far? I feel like I've gone a little bit quickly, but of course, if there's anything that is unclear, please do use the Q&A section, and I can answer your questions. We do just have to wait a little bit while Ubuntu updates. No questions. Everything is clear. Anything I can elaborate on while this is going on? It's also fine. All right. In that case, okay. So if Ubuntu prompts you for changes, in this case, it's the SSH server. This was automatically configured by DigitalOcean, so we don't really want any changes to be made. So we'll go ahead and keep the local version currently installed. Let's just hit enter on that. That is perfectly fine. Same thing here. Modified by you or a script. It's just a configuration file. We're just going to keep it by default. We're just going to hit enter once again. And that is fine. So this will finish up in just a quick moment. All right. Yes. Let me talk a little bit about domain registration. I forgot to mention that. So once you actually purchase a domain, you'll see I have one here. What you want to do is you want to configure the name servers. So whoever you bought the domain from, you want to go into DNS administration. And in order to use it with Cloudflare, what you want to do is you want to go down to your DNS server and actually change the DNS servers, which I've already done here. You can see this domain is currently using external DNS servers, which you will get in the instructions when you go to Cloudflare. You go up here, you press add site, type in your domain name that you've registered. I see a question. I'll get right to it. You enter your domain that you've just registered here, press add site, and then it will give you two name servers that you put into your registrar's settings, and it'll take like 24 hours for it to fully come across. And once that is done, you can use Cloudflare for your DNS settings. Are we able to point a subdomain to a specific port in the IP? So the thing about the ports is that on port 80 and port 443, the browsers already know that that is HTTP or HTTPS traffic. So, I mean, you can use a reverse proxy. So, for example, if you have myapp.website.com and you have website.com, let's say website.com points you to a WordPress website and my app points you to a custom coded app. The way that is handled is through the reverse proxy. So, if you run my app on, let's say, port 5005, you can use a reverse proxy that differentiates website.com and myapp.website.com. So I will show that a little bit in the CyberPanel demo that we will do in just a second here. However, it is an advanced setting in CyberPanel. You can also use Nginx, which is just a package you can install on Ubuntu server, and there are a few guides on how you can do that. But to answer your question, in order to do that, you would do exactly what I did here, and you would point that to your server, and it could be the same server as your main root domain. and then use the reverse proxy on that server will branch it out to where it needs to go. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, feel free to send in another question. And of course, I'm available on the Discord as well, on the Hack PSU one, and I will drop my Discord at the end of this this workshop in the chat. Right. So now that we've managed to deploy our server, let's go ahead and install CyberPanel. So CyberPanel is our GUI. It is a paid piece of software, but you can also you can use a free version of it, which works perfectly fine for everything I've been using. Doesn't really have any limitations, but that's, yeah, it works for just hosting simple websites and also, well, the reverse proxy. So it's really easy. You can go to cyberpanel.net and you just follow their instructions. You on DigitalOcean, there's already a pre-made image for it when you create a droplet, but we're not going to do that. So I'm just going to copy this here and paste it into our updated Ubuntu server. So that'll be really quick. The install actually takes quite a while, so yeah, I'll just go through the initial setup options. You press 1 to install CyberPanel. You want to install it with Open Lightspeed because that is the free version, although you could pay for the Lightspeed Enterprise version if you're using this for a very big app or a true production server. Press 1 here. Yeah, we want to install the full service, so make sure to press yes. No remote MySQL. We want this server to be self-contained. Of course, this depends on your app. We'll continue with the latest version. I am going to set a password at this stage. Make sure to use a separate password than the one that you used for your root account, just in case. We want to install this extension. We don't want this one. Read this. We're not using it here. I'm not going to use this beta service that they're trying to push with this version, so that's a no. And now this will take a while and it will, yeah, it will get set up. So since we don't really have that much time, I will show you one that I've already set up. You can see it went through the entire setup. Everything's all good. And then we have our panel, the username, the password, which, ooh, okay, that's visible. It's okay. It's only a development server. But you can see here the different ports. You have port 8090 for the web GUI, 80 and 443 for the web server, 21 for file transfer, and the mail service ones, and as well as the DNS. I'm not going to, no, I'm not going to restart that. All right, so then we can open up our web browser and we can actually navigate to, well, I've actually set it up like this, so we can go 252design.nl, because remember, in our DNS settings, we set it to the IP version 4 address of our server. And I'm going to go colon 8090. That will take us to the CyberPanel GUI. Oh, I do have to type an HTTP because we don't actually have an SSL. Colon 8090. Otherwise, it tends to be problematic. I think that is also having issues. Okay, so I'm just going to copy the IP address in that case and go to port 8090. Yeah, there we go. Right, so once you're logged into the dashboard, you use admin and then the password that you set in the setup. And finally, you have ended up at this user interface. So we want to just create a new website. I'm going to I think I've already set one up, so I am going to delete it real quick so I can show you the full process. So if I go to list websites, come on, here we are. All right, so let's create a new website on this server. So this web panel is open source and it's used for, hosting multiple websites. So don't worry too much about the package and the owner. You can refer to the CyberPanel documentation if you want to use that functionality. But just for the default stuff, we'll use the default package. We'll enter our domain name that we're using here. So 252design.nl will take us there. I'm just going to enter my email here. Doesn't really matter what email you use. For WordPress, I'm using PHP 7.4. Depending on your app, it could be different. Enable SSL, and we'll also create a mail domain if we want to use this as our email server. So this will just take a quick second to set up. And after that, it is a one-click install to set up a WordPress website. But of course, you have different options. I think Joomla is also something that is available to you. There are a couple of quick install things that you can really easily deploy on here. However, if you are looking to use it as a reverse proxy, the best thing to do would be to look on the CyberPanel documentation. And that is what you were talking about, the person that submitted the question earlier, is that if you want to use a subdomain that points you to a specific app on the server that runs on a different port, what you want to do is you want to use the reverse proxy feature to point it to that app. So we have 252design.nl. If I go ahead and just open that up, you'll see CyberPanel is successfully installed. Perfect. And through Cloudflare, we already have the SSL certificate, which is great. That means our website is secure and it has HTTPS by default. Then really quick, to set up WordPress or any other application that comes pre-installed, you can just go down here to Application Installer. WordPress plus LS Cache is a plugin that it comes pre-installed. So I'm just going to hit that. Just say my demo design website. And then just quickly fill that out. You want to set your WordPress username and password, and then just press install now. And it will take a matter of seconds to set that up. The great thing about CyberPanel is that you can also use Docker on it. It is an option to create containers on it, so you can actually really easily deploy Nginx as a container and just use that as your reverse proxy instead. So very versatile web GUI. Equivalents to it are usually paid, so Plesk is another equivalent to it, and I forgot what the other one is, but it is very popular. But yeah, let's just check that this worked. And there we are. We now have a deployed WordPress website. Obviously, you can always just upload the files using the file manager, file transfer protocol. CyberPanel is really great. I invite you to explore the documentation and really see how you can use it to deploy it on your own server. Right, I think that basically concludes our demo and also our presentation, our workshop for today. Thank you very much for listening in. If you have any further questions, I am on the Discord server for HackPSU, but I will also put my Discord into the chat in case you want to talk to me directly. I'm also reachable via my email, so I'll put that as well. And yeah, thank you very much for being here. And Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you
I
for
hope
doing
this
this.
helped.
I hope everyone enjoyed this, and of course, reach out to me if you have questions. I know that was a lot to go over in 50 minutes, but incredibly informative and very useful for everyone here. So I hope everyone enjoyed this and have a good day hacking and keep participating in Hack PSU events. We've got a lot more in store for you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and end the workshop now and finish up this recording, but feel free to reach out if you've got any more questions, okay? Thank you, Alexander. This was awesome.
Thank you very much for having me.